Okay, let's move on to these MIDI generators. Now these get really exciting. Um, so to get to it, we're going to go down to this generate tab and open that up. Okay, and now we've got a bunch of options here. So I'm going to select rhythm. So the difference with these is with the transform objects, we're going to start with some music or some notes in our MIDI grid, and then it's going to transform them. With generators, we don't need anything. We can just say go. So here are some settings. I'm going to hit the regenerate button, and there we go. We made a rhythm. So here's what our settings are. Our steps are the number of steps in the pattern. Now, that may include empty steps, right? It's not going to put something on every step. So in this case, there are 6 steps to the pattern. So that means in our case, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is where it starts over again. So you can kind of see that it goes note, not a note, 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 note. So note, not a note, 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 note. So that's the pattern. So there are 6 steps to it. I could make it, longer if I wanted. 16. It's cool. Let's do that, actually. Let me make my loop a little bit longer here. Okay, so now in this clip, the pattern isn't going to repeat at all because there are 16 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 12, 16 in this whole clip. Okay, so density. How many notes are going to happen within that pattern? Okay, so if we say 16 notes are going to happen, then they're all going to be on because we have 16 steps, 16 notes. If I say 8, then about half of these are going to have a note in it. Okay, and then this pattern, this is, I believe this crazy high number we're seeing now is the number of possible patterns that could happen, right? And it's like 6,000 and some. So we can just kind of dial through here until we land on a pattern that we like, right? Cool. So this is just generating a rhythm for us, right? So if you're like, I need a rhythm. Let's say you're working on like hi-hats and you're like, cool, I need some cool hi-hats and I want them fast and frantic. Let's set this to a 30-second note. And crank up our density a bit. Cool. That'll be good. All right, I'm going to go back to a 16th note here. There we go. All right, we can also do some stuff like splits. These are fun. So let's say 20% of the notes are going to split. That means they're going to be a doubled rhythm. So you can see one just happened right here. So it split that into 2 notes. So that's really going to add a lot more variation to it. Shift is going to rotate just like we saw earlier in one of the transformations. So if I turn this up, we can see it's just kind of rotating around. It's actually easier to see if you look at the tiny MIDI grid down here. Watch. Keep your eye on that, and you can kind of see what shift is doing. It's just kind of shifting it on the grid. Let's take that back down to 0. And then we've got some options here where with velocity and what frequency it's generating. So it's pretty handy just for generating rhythms, right? Great for drums, great for anything once you put some pitches to it. So you might say, cool, let's do some stuff like that and that and that, and now you're generating some kind of cool melodies. There. Let's hear it. Oops. Okay, nothing to write home about out of context, but a very handy tool if you're just looking to generate some stuff. Okay, let's go down to seed. Now, seed is a weird word that they've used here. I think they're trying to avoid using the word melody because you could use this for so much more than a melody, but that's also kind of what you can do with it. So this is really actually quite simple. So we've got three parameters: pitch, duration, and velocity. So let's say pitch. Let's go to C3 to C4. I want this whole thing to stay within that octave. So I'm just going to set this to C3. Actually, can just click and drag right here. There we go. And here I'm going to go to C4. There. C3 to C4, okay? Just that octave. Okay, and you can already see it generating some stuff. So let's say duration. I want 16th notes and up to 8th notes. Sure. Velocity. I want a pretty stable velocity, so let's say, you know, up there. Now, voices. Voices is an interesting term here. You can think of voices as like how many things are going to happen at the same time. Like if someone was going to sing this, how many people would it take to sing it? That's like an easy way to think about voices. So, 1 means there's going to be no overlapping notes. Let's go up to 4 just for fun, see what it generates. And then density. So at 62%, that means we're going to have 62% of the area filled with notes. I want to actually fill that out quite a bit more. Let's go to 100%. What the heck? All right, here's what we got. Now remember, we're all within a scale here. We're all in C major because of this up here and up here. So I'm looking at that first chord. We'll see what it did here. Let's take a listen. That's weird. It's a bit. Let's make some longer notes. Let's go up to just 16th notes. And now, just out of curiosity, well, let's hear it one more time, then I'm going to try one more thing. Now, this is interesting because what I heard here, in addition to some stuff I didn't like, I heard I think that's what I heard. Those last two notes might be wrong, but that's a cool little melody that's buried in there. Did you hear that in there? Here it is again. That's pretty cool. You know, let's take this entirely Ableton created melody and let's put it in my strings. What do you think it's going to sound like if I put it in the strings? Listen. Pretty cool. So we can do some interesting stuff with this generate. If you're working and you've got a deadline, this is a good way to get started with something. If I was working on this, what I might do is get rid of some of these other notes. Oh, maybe extend that out. Make sure we really hear the things I want to hear. I lost that note. It's a great place to start for something really interesting. So, seed. All right, up next, shape. This is another melodic kind of idea. So, we've got right here, it's kind of hard to see, but right here we've got some presets for directions. So we can go flat, up, down, arc down. So if we go flat, we're going to make just flat notes. But we can also say, oops, here. Arc up. Cool. So obviously you can see exactly what this is doing. We make an arc and it's going to make an arc. And it's going to conform this to our scale. That's going to be great. We can also just draw in this little window. Just do this kind of stuff thing. That's neat. We can define our pitch ranges here. So we can say if we don't want it to go so high. Could do that. Now, we can change the rate. This would be like our rhythm. Tie seems to mean that some notes will hook together and we'll get some longer rhythms. Like if I turn it up just a little bit, it's get this note connected together in making one longer note. So I'm going to turn that up a little bit just to add some variation. Density, 100%, there's going to be no gaps. We're going to have a note on everything. But if I turn that down, there'll be some gaps in it. It's cool. And jitter tends to mean, I think in this context, kind of like it glitches, like getting outside of the pattern. So if I do this, let me just go to that flat thing. And then I crank up jitter, we're going to get some notes that drift out of it. So think of it like, you know, a glitch kind of a thing. Randomness, add something cool. Let's do that. Okay, here, let's see what we got. There you go, just completely randomly generated. Not a bad place to start for a little violin solo, I gotta say. Okay, next we get to stacks. Now stacks is means chords. So let's just generate some chords. Now, interestingly, and I probably shouldn't say this, but in a very early version of the beta version of this was just called chords. But they must have had an internal discussion. And they said, you know, technically, what we're generating here is not chords, it's stacks of notes. Because not all of these are functional harmonic chords, which is true. It's splitting hairs. They called it stacks. Let's call it stacks, but this is generating chords. So here's what we have. We have all these shapes. Now these shapes are really quite interesting. So I haven't figured out yet the correlation between these diagrams and the actual shapes and what it's generating. But this is a major chord. So let's make it. So here we go. So I said root is C, inversion is 0. So I'm going to make it. And now we're going to have a C major chord. So all we need to do really is set a root and then a shape and maybe an inversion. I'll show you. So let's make a second chord here. Okay, so now I have 2 chords. With this second one, let's say the root is E. And let's change the shape. Okay, that's a minor chord. I don't know why. I don't get it. But then you've got these other ones that are getting kind of interesting. They're going through different harmonies, and they're fun. Okay, now you see how this is stacked really high. What an inversion means in like music theory world is the order of the notes. It's not going to change any notes. It's just the order of the notes. So if this sounds like too big of a leap from this to this, like let's hear it. Right, it's like way up high. So let's change the inversion. Okay, so that stacks all the notes. Now let's move the root down an octave to E2. There. See, now it's right in the same thing, in the same range. So the inversion just changes the order of the notes through octaves. That's all it does. So now we got something kind of cool. Let's add another chord. Let's add 2 more chords, actually. So with this one, let's say the root is A. And let's change the shape to, let's go here. This is rather nice. I'm going to adjust that inversion. That's nice. And the fourth one, let's go. That's cool. Maybe I'll take that inversion down. There. All right. Now we have an Ableton invented chord progression. Let's hear it. Okay, pretty cool. It's a nice chord progression. All right, we can change the duration of the whole segment if we want, or each individual chord. We can say this chord is short. So clicking on each one of these adjusts it. So we can make them different lengths. And then offset is just going to kind of push it to a new spot. Okay, and of course you can also just like click and drag and move stuff like the old-fashioned way. That's just fine as well. So that's how Ableton can write chord progressions for you. Pretty cool. Okay, let's go to Euclidean. So again, this one is listed under Max for Live within the Generate menu. That means that it's designed using Max for Live. It also means it's probably going to be a little weirder, and it definitely is. So far with this, I've only been able to really generate like really dark and creepy things, but maybe that's great. So what we can do is we've got these different patterns. We can click on this circle and make different things just in the center of the circle. We've got, so there are rotations around a circle. We can turn off voices here. We can go to these voices and specify kind of what note they are. And we can shift the whole thing up or down. We can give each note a velocity. Okay, and basically this is what it generates. It's weird. Here's a new pattern. So a lot of the same controls, just a very different kind of way of doing it. What's interesting is that I don't think this is just choosing notes for us, and it's more than happy to go to ignore our scale because we can just set the notes that we want, but let's force it to be in a key. There we go. Let's do full density, 16th notes, 16 steps. Sure. These are the same. There we go. I can see what this would be good for. This would be good for if you have one chord and you're going to sit on that chord for a while and you just want some rhythmic things you can do with that chord. You could dial in this chord, that chord here. Like let's say G. Let's take that up a little bit though. Let's say, okay, E, let's just make an E minor chord here. E, G, B, and then another E. So really simple. Okay, so I'm setting in an E minor chord. Oops, I want this B down an octave. Sure, okay. Now I can go here and just generate patterns and ways to like keep this interesting. It's kind of like arpeggiate in that way, but just a little more dense and complicated. So interesting effect. I could see finding a use for this.